When someone accuses you, criticizes you, or questions you in a way that feels unfair, your first instinct is probably to explain yourself, to show them the truth, to make them understand your side. That feels natural because we've been trained to believe that defending ourselves clears our name. But in reality, defending yourself does something you don't realize in the moment. It tells the other person that their words carry enough power to put you in a position where you have to prove yourself. And the moment you do that, you've stepped into the wrong role. Think about it like this. When you defend yourself, you're walking straight into a courtroom where the other person is the judge. You're handing them a gavel and saying, "Decide if I'm guilty or innocent." That doesn't sound like power. That sounds like submission. And the truth is, they never had that kind of authority to begin with. By defending yourself, you actually give them control over the conversation, even if they don't deserve it. You shift from being an equal to being someone trying to earn approval. That's why defending is dangerous. Now, this doesn't mean you shouldn't clarify when there's confusion. But clarification and defense are two completely different things. Clarification is calm, factual, and grounded in confidence. Defense, on the other hand, is reactive. It's emotional. It's you scrambling to prove your worth in someone else's eyes. And that difference matters because people don't just hear your words, they feel your energy. The moment you start defending yourself, your tone and body language reveal that you're under pressure, and that weakens your position without you realizing it. What most people don't realize is that defending yourself actually keeps the conflict alive. Imagine someone says, "You're always late," and you respond with, "No, I'm not. I was on time yesterday and the day before." Now you're arguing inside the frame they created. The focus is no longer on whether their statement is even fair. It's on whether you can disprove it. And the more energy you spend defending, the stronger their accusation looks. They don't have to work hard anymore because you've taken on all the work of proving. That's the trap. Here's the deeper problem. When you defend yourself, you're operating from a place of insecurity, even if you don't see it that way. Because if you were completely secure in who you are, their words wouldn't pull you into proving anything. Think about the strongest leaders, the most confident people you know. They don't rush to defend themselves against every comment or criticism. They stand steady. They let words bounce off them. That doesn't mean they don't care. It means they know that defending themselves is not the same thing as standing in their truth. Defending is also short-term relief, but long-term damage. In the moment, it feels good to throw back explanations or arguments because you think it sets the record straight. But later, you realize you've actually validated the other person's power. You've shown them exactly how to push your buttons and get a reaction. People remember that. And once they know they can pull you into defense mode, they'll use it against you again. So by defending, you're training people on how to control you, even if that's not your intention. The reality is this: the most powerful people don't defend themselves because they don't accept the premise that they're on trial. They know their value isn't determined by someone else's words. They know their truth doesn't require permission. And they know that defense doesn't prove strength, it proves pressure. So the next time someone comes at you with a criticism, before you rush to explain yourself, pause. Notice the pull to defend. Because the very act of defending is silently telling the other person, "You're right, I owe you proof," when in fact, you don't. Every conversation operates inside a frame. A frame is simply the perspective that sets the rules for how the conversation unfolds. Whoever controls the frame controls the direction, the tone, and the outcome. Most people don't even realize a frame exists, and because of that, they walk into someone else's frame without question. That's when arguments spiral out of control. The person who sets the frame dictates the game, and if you're not aware of it, you end up playing by rules you never agreed to in the first place. Think about a time when someone accused you of something. The moment you start explaining or defending, you've already accepted their frame that you owe them proof. They've set the terms and you've stepped inside it. That's why you feel cornered, because you're no longer in control of the direction. Controlling the frame doesn't mean being aggressive or manipulative. It means recognizing when someone is trying to box you into a role you don't belong in and having the confidence to step outside of it instead of playing along. The power of controlling the frame lies in understanding that conversations aren't just about words, they're about positioning. If someone says you're selfish, the frame is that their opinion defines your character. If you immediately say, "No, I'm not, here's why," you've accepted that their judgment matters more than your reality. But if you respond with calm presence, something as simple as, "That's an interesting way to see it," you shift the frame. You're no longer in their courtroom. You've reestablished yourself as equal, not as the accused. Frames show up everywhere, in the workplace, in relationships, even in casual conversations. For example, if a boss says, "You're not working hard enough," and you instantly start rattling off your accomplishments, you've accepted their frame of inadequacy. Instead, you could say, "Help me understand what you mean by hard enough." That question shifts the frame from accusation to clarification. You've moved from proving yourself to making them define their terms. That's control, and it shows you won't just absorb someone else's perspective without challenge. Controlling the frame also prevents escalation. When people throw accusations or sharp words, they want you to react. They want you inside their frame because that's where they feel powerful. But the moment you refuse to play that role, the energy changes. They may push harder at first, but eventually they realize you're not giving them the fuel they expect. Instead of defending, you're calmly redirecting. Instead of explaining, you're holding steady. And that stability forces the other person to adjust because frames only work when both people agree to them. It takes practice to notice frames in real time because most of us are wired to respond instantly. But once you start paying attention, you'll see them everywhere. Every time someone says, "Why are you always," or "You never," they're setting a frame. Your job isn't to prove them wrong. Your job is to decide whether you accept that frame or reshape it. Sometimes that means asking a question. Sometimes that means staying quiet. Sometimes it means calmly saying, "That's not how I see it." Each response keeps you outside their box. The key is remembering that control isn't about dominating the other person. It's about not letting them dominate you. When you control the frame, you keep your power. You keep your dignity. You keep the ability to decide how the conversation goes instead of being dragged into battles you can't win. The person who controls the frame doesn't have to be the loudest or the sharpest. They just have to be the one who refuses to step into someone else's story and instead writes their own inside every interaction. One of the hardest skills in communication is learning how to acknowledge what someone says without feeling the need to justify yourself. Most people blur those two together. They think acknowledging is the same thing as agreeing, so they immediately go into defense mode. But acknowledgement is not agreement. It's simply showing you heard the words without stepping into the trap of proving yourself. The moment you add justification, you hand over your power. But when you stop at acknowledgement, you keep control of the conversation and protect your confidence. Let's say someone says, "You don't care about me." Your natural instinct might be to argue back, list the things you've done, or explain how much you actually care. That's justification. But when you do that, you've accepted their frame and placed yourself on trial. Acknowledgement sounds different. It might be as simple as, "I hear that's how you feel." Notice the shift. You're not agreeing with them. You're not defending yourself. You're simply recognizing their perspective without allowing it to define you. That's the power of acknowledgement. Acknowledgement works because it diffuses tension instead of adding fuel. When people come at you with accusations or strong emotions, they're often looking for a fight. They want you to defend because defense keeps the conflict alive. But when you acknowledge calmly, the wind comes out of their sails. They expect pushback, but instead you give presence. That pause forces them to reconsider their approach because without your justifications, they have nothing to argue against. It's like dropping the rope in a tug of war. The game stops when you refuse to pull. The biggest mistake people make is believing that if they don't justify themselves, they'll look guilty. But the opposite is true. Just